I'm talking again and again in consultation with colleagues who are working under increasingly difficult circumstances. And that's not just not having access to teams, but is a sense that psychotherapy is being squeezed within the NHS, and that psychotherapists of whatever ilk and clinical psychologists who are psychotherapeutically minded are very much getting the message that there is an intolerance for that kind of wanting to have time to think, spend some time with people, and work in a thoughtful, therapeutic manner. There's an enormous pressure which the evidence base gets misused for, on, I heard a manager call it quick and dirty stuff. Something that can be done by somebody who is at a small amount of training, can therefore be employed very cheaply, can do something formulaic very, very quickly, and it's going along with the way that both child and adult services, in my observation, have defended themselves against the pressure of too much work and too few resources by only allowing people into the services if they meet certain diagnostic psychiatric criteria. You know, when I was training as a psychologist, we thought it was immoral to diagnose a child because children are in process of development. Yes. And a diagnosis fixes you. Yes. And labels you. Now children only get seen if they're diagnosed with quite serious labels, and that it has worked in terms of getting the waiting list pressures off people, but it has massive consequences. It goes along with a very much movement back towards the old medical model, and towards a psychiatry-led medical practice, and towards a mindset that is that sort of black box mindset. There's something wrong inside this person, and someone's going to fix it. And if the fixing doesn't work, then it was the client who didn't use the treatment properly. All of that's happening. It's going hand in hand with the massive recession we're in. So those ways of offering help go along with the fact that money is running out, that I think political decisions have been made a long time ago about the end of the NHS, the welfare system, the whole Naibevan idealism. Yeah. And so what I'm seeing in colleagues is partly that they are struggling to maintain good practice, that they are getting abused because their passion and their commitment and their ethics means that they will keep working harder and harder to try and deliver a decent service, and that they often, without noticing it, are beginning to move away from their ways of working into a first-order cybernetic, this person has got this illness and the treatment for that is such. Yes. And they're not doing, you know, if you remember the early Milan book, one of the points they made was about a linguistic change, that one does not say that person is depressed and that person's angry. Yes. You say to yourself, in the context of something called therapy and in interaction with me, this person shows behaviour that can be called angry. Yes. Yeah. That's been lost because I think the pressure of the system for certainty, under conditions of anxiety, people go for certainty, and the more the pushes for certainty, the more the capacity to work in the way that we can and have done begins to be lost. So I'm very, very concerned and sad for colleagues who are having to try and hang in there under these circumstances.
It would seem too poignant a moment to stop because it feels a very sad way.
No, we need to.
We need to come back up. So, and I'm cautious about asking you, hints for how people can survive in this context. although I think that's what we're all doing.
Yeah.
We're all talking about how can we manage to survive, what can we do, how can we group together to keep some kind of support networks.
Exactly. But I think that's one of it, isn't it? Is to group together, to be support, to continue to claim the space, to talk with other people about what you're thinking, to make that systemic, self-observing position possible, to support each other in this work, to talk with managers, to use the massive evidence base that there is actually for our way of working, and not be just overwhelmed by claims, often ignorant claims, because people can't, if they're not expert therapists, they can't necessarily know unless we tell them that this way of working is very, very good, economical, quick, effective, all of that stuff. Everyone I talk to, when I say, how do you hang in there, they say, it's the clinical work that keeps me going, because that is so wonderful, that is so interesting. I also think, because I'm always on the optimistic side, it's called the Candide error that you deliberately employ. I think pendulum will swing again.
Yes.
This is a phase. It will change again, partly because ordinary people who would like to continue to have the kind of access to us that they used to have, and referrers like GPs are more and more fed up and knowledgeable, and the internet allows them to go and see what the evidence base is. Yeah. And then Fritjof Capra, whom I admire vastly, thinks that this phase we're in is the last. He uses the metaphor of a wave. And he says this wave that has been going for quite a couple of thousand years is crashing, and he identifies that with the kind of thinking and social patterns that have to do, for example, with belief in constant progress, in more is better, in hard control of the world sciences, patriarchy, etc., etc. And he says the next wave is already well in place, and he identifies that with ways of thinking that are ecosystemic, systemic, feminist, etc. Yes. Now, that wave, as it crashes, has certainly got the capacity to smash us all to smithereens, but if it doesn't,
we could come up.
The next wave is already coming up. That's all I can kind of... is when I run back to Bateson. Because actually, I think everything that we try to think about, Bateson has at least touched on.
Yes, and of course Capra and Bateson. Capra was a student of Bateson and had a strong connection.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. That's fantastic.